to episode 35 of Last Turn. I'm Bart, and as always, I'm joined by Evan. How are you doing today?
So very well. How are you doing, Bart?
I'm doing great.
That's
So
awesome.
actually, I mean, we should both be doing awesome. There's been a bunch of things that have happened recently for Last Turn at large.
Very exciting things.
Oh, yeah. So we recently did an interview with The Daring Reporter.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear the interview in the latter half of their 21st episode, and you can find their podcast on thedaringreporter.podbean.com. They're two awesome dudes, so I highly suggest checking them out.
Yeah, Kurt and Jordan, I forget their Twitter handles. There's obviously at the Daring Reporter. That should actually just list both of their Twitter handles so you can see it there. At Jordan_Lingo and at Daring Alkaline were our interviewers.
Yeah, they were great. It was a lot of fun. So actually, today we wanted to expand on the discussion that we opened up with in the interview a little bit and talk about the upcoming balance changes and maybe why balance changes happen, but also what might happen.
Yeah, both like a general look at what are balance changes anyway, and then also what we think about these specific upcoming ones.
Yeah, because I think that there's definitely a lot of places to go. There's a whole lot to be talked about in terms of which cards are too powerful and what needs a change. So we think that there's sort of, you can break down reasons that balance changes happen into three buckets. There might be more than this, but there's three that I think are obvious. Do you want to start us off with number one, Evan?
Oh yeah, this one is made for me. Power level. So a card or strategy is just too powerful, and it's winning way too much. One good example was just the class Druid when Knights of the Frozen Throne came out.
Yep, I think that is probably one of the better examples. I mean, I think there's definitely other examples of power level related nerfs. I think when players think about balance changes, their thought process often starts and ends at power level, and I think that that's incorrect. You shouldn't. This isn't the only thing to consider, but I think this is the main consideration. People are often calling for power level related nerfs more often than other nerfs.
Yeah, so, this card just beat me in this ridiculous way. Blizzard, fix it. This is
exactly.
Obviously wrong. I just had a bad time playing your game, so you screwed something up. Do something about it.
Yeah, that actually might be related to that pattern of thinking is probably related to another reason they might do balance changes. But yeah, power level is a really important consideration. In order for this game to be fun, you need to have a pretty large set of viable strategies. I mean, there are some games, card and other, that do not have them, and this can pose really major problems for them. I guess actually one notable example might be Melee. Super Smash Bros. Melee has just a few characters that see tournament level play. Though surprisingly, that game has been around for almost 2 decades. So what am I to say that it's a problem at all?
Yeah, no, it's somehow resilient to that.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
So the power level nerf they did to Druid was Innervate at that time, right? And Spreading Plague? No, that was Spreading Plague.
No, they did both in the same patch.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. So they made it. Innervate used to give 2 mana, now it gives 1. Good times. And Spreading Plague came out costing 5, and then was increased to 6 less than a month later. Something like that.
I think that I want to say this happened in the same nerf, but I'm not sure.
Well, I'm just saying Knights of the Frozen Throne came out, and then less than a month later, both of those things were done.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I mean that was ridiculous. This was a time where the Druid class, like Druid had 2 viable decks. It had a really degenerate aggro deck, and it had J Druid, which was just an incredibly powerful mid-range deck. And both decks had pretty excellent win rates. So the Druid class was 40% of the metagame.
Yeah, the decks were so, like, one was so fast, the other one was so resilient to everything. You got a ton of armor all the time. You never ran out of deck, so you just beat every fatigue strategy if you're playing Jades. I'm certain I was playing Jade Druid just as much as I could then, because like this deck is way too powerful right now. I got to get in as many games as possible before they nerf it, which they did. And another tough thing about it is if you're going to play against Druid at the time, there's 2 decks that are both really powerful with completely opposite strategies. right? One is gonna like pass turn one, then play Wild Growth turn two, and that's their scariest opener. And then the other deck is playing Vicious Fledgling turn one.
Yeah,
And
or 4 cards and making like, a bunch of 2/2s.
yeah, getting a Patches with Charge and giving everything +1/+1, and you had no idea which one was gonna happen.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And
So
those are two very different games where you want to keep very different cards.
exactly, mulliganing became extremely difficult at that time.
Yep.
My strategy was to generally assume it was the one I actually thought my deck was weak to give myself a better game. That usually worked out because I was playing Jade Druid, so if I mulligan as a or token Druid and then played against a Jade Druid, it's the mirror match, and obviously I'm a better player than them, so I'm favored.
Yep. I mean, over the course of many games, the more skilled players is favored more and more. You accumulate smaller and smaller edges when you're making larger and larger men.
And my
So,
power level was so high.
another example that you had mentioned before we started recording was Small Time Buccaneer. That card was completely egregious as a 1/2 because it was. I mean, it wasn't a 1/2. It was a 3/2 for 1 mana, and it was neutral, which meant, and it was a pirate, so it summoned Patches. So it was actually really like a 4/3.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah. Yes.
Right now it's a 1/1 pirate that gets 2 attack while you have a weapon, but it was printed as a 1/2, and it could get Patches with Charge. So if you play a 1 attack weapon early, you can just play a 3/2 and kill your opponent's board easily.
Yep. And both the Shaman class at the time and Warrior class had access to really excellent 1 mana weapons in Nissa's First Mate. That is an excellent card. I love to call it 1 mana muster for battle. And there's also Spirit Clause at the time, which was it had its effect, but it cost 1 mana.
Yeah, so Spirit Claws also cost 1, just to give a full scope of how ridiculous this Shaman deck was.
Good times.
It also still had Tunnel Trog, I think.
It did, yeah. It had Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem. Yeah, that was the first deck I rode to Legend.
It was pretty filthy. And you use Southsea Deckhand because it also summoned Patches, and both of those are amazing with Flametongue Totem.
Yes.
The deck, like, you could actually do some really dumb stuff just playing charge minions next to Flametongues and just do like 15 damage out of nowhere.
Yeah, the damage from hand is an issue with that deck. I think that's something they try to avoid with a lot of the balance changes. So moving on to perhaps another reason they might do balance changes. Power level is the obvious one, right? Everybody knows about that one. We can all talk about that, and I think a lot of players think that is, and both casual and professional players think that it is Blizzard's exclusive role to nerf for power level, but there are other reasons. Mm-hmm. So another one that people love to meme about, but is actually very serious, is design space.
So serious.
So a card or strategy could restrict the designers from making additional changes to the game because it's on the cusp of being too powerful and just needs a little bit of help before it becomes degenerate, or it's already something that is a potential power level consideration, and it gets better as the card pool increases in some way.
Yeah, it's like synergy is too good.
So
it's kind of the problem, and like there's like if you wanted to print something like Rush, maybe it would have been broken with the Rush mechanic around, and so they had to like this is a theoretical card they didn't print because it wasn't too strong, but it limited their design space.
Yeah, so it's hard to identify these. It's hard to identify these because as players, we're not tuned to think about the possible cards that they can print. And we're not testing, our theoretical cards and stuff. But you better believe on the Blizzard design team, they totally are. And they are having, it's just like any other worthwhile endeavor in life. I'm sure that their like bad to good idea ratio is like 3 or 4 to 1. So they're testing a lot of stinkers, a lot of cards that they probably can't print because they're either too strong or too weak.
Or don't fit in.
Yeah, or don't fit in, right?
Because when you have the pool of 500 possibilities and you haven't really narrowed down the theme yet and what the cards are going to do with each other, something might seem fine, like some ghost guy that discards a card. But then when you're down to 150, you might realize like this has nothing to do with the rest of the set.
Yeah, then you cut it. But so this is their, something that they will notice is like repeatedly they identify like, oh, we can't print this card because this other card exists. Oh, we can't print this card because this card exists again. Like it's the same problem here. So like you eliminate an entire class of card just because another card exists, and that stops them from printing things because of power level, because it would create a power level consideration. Warsong Commander was an example of this. So I think the reason ultimately Warsong Commander was nerfed was because of the Grim Patron deck and the Grim Patron based strategy. I think that like that also was a power level consideration, but the existence of but the reason they chose to change Commander and not Grim Patron, which was the deck's namesake, is because Warsong Commander's effect was incredibly powerful and abusable, but also really flexible.
Right. It really just, there's a lot of ways to play something with low attack and then give it more attack.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of ways to play a good, low attack minion and then benefit from the fact that it has charge. A good example of one such minion is Patches. That is, and actually Patches might even be partially a design space related consideration, but was most likely power level or something.
Yeah, usually if it's getting any kind of balance change, it's at least a little bit power level.
Yeah,
but their pirate options, are limited by Patches because now they really can't make them too strong if Patches still has charge. One good example of a design space change was creating the Hall of Fame.
That is true. Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Because they put Azure Drake and Sylvanas in there, not because those cards are too powerful. There's so many decks that wouldn't use them for various reasons. Maybe they're too aggressive and don't want things that cost 5 and 6. But if you're gonna play something that costs 5, it just never made any sense to use anything besides Azure Drake.
Yeah, that was their reasoning behind Ragnaros as well. The question with they had said, this is something like a quote. It's close to a quote, but it's a paraphrase, which is they said something like the question no longer became, is this 8-drop good? The question was, is this 8-drop better than Ragnaros? And the answer is almost always no.
Yep.
So Ragnaros it meant that they in the 8 mana, because Ragnaros was also neutral. Every class had access to it, and every class wants that effect. It's a powerful effect in pretty much any strategy that is interested in playing an 8 mana card. So, it stopped them from, if they had an interesting 8-drop that was maybe synergistic or something, like, why do that? Why bother working for your power when you could just play Ragnaros instead?
Yeah, for another 8-drop to be worth playing, it would have had to be a power level problem.
Yes. Yeah, right, exactly.
The existence of Ragnaros, either they couldn't print all the 8-drops that they were printing, nobody cared about, but if they had made those 8-drops stronger, it wouldn't have actually been a solution. Then they would have been too good of 8-drops. So they instead just casually slid Ragnaros to a different part of the game, and now they can make things like Shudderwock, I guess.
Right, yeah, but I mean the fact that but that's a good thing. Even if Shudderwock is not like a super duper powerful, expensive card, it's like those types of cards can exist because Ragnaros doesn't exist.
Yeah, and they didn't have to make it cost 10 and make it a 2/2, Right. They could actually make it pretty strong.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Or they can have Lich King, which is a premium 8-drop that a lot of different decks are interested in playing, but is not so powerful that it's an auto-include in any deck that can go to turn 8.
Yeah, it's a lot more realistically susceptible to removal, and also to silence. That's the annoying thing about Ragnaros, is if you silence it, then it can attack.
Yeah, it just doesn't really make the card that much worse at all when you silence it, because it basically had charge.
It gets better.
Yeah, right, yeah, it does. In a way, yeah. In some ways, yes, in some ways, no. But it definitely it doesn't help to silence it. So the third consideration, and again, these are not all totally orthogonal. They're, I think, ultimately all really just power level. but I think that they're different enough they warrant mentioning. The third consideration is actually restricted play. So a card that promotes an unfun or just overly uniform or restrictive way of playing the game.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
If one deck is too dominant, it becomes like you either play that deck or you have to play one of the few things that beats it. And if those aren't fun, the only way to win isn't fun. And
Right.
you've mentioned the axiom about how people will do that anyway. Like whatever's
Yeah,
the
that
most
was
effective strategy, players will play it even if they're not enjoying it.
yeah, that was I think that was from Mark Rosewater's like 20 Rules for Game Design, his like GDC talk or his article series. Really amazing, by the way. I highly recommend that everybody check that out. It's Mark Rosewater. He's lead designer at Wizards for Magic. The dude's been doing his job and writing articles for, 15 years now, and they're all amazing. There's a lot of concepts that he invented that you're probably using or aware of and not aware that he made them. He's like Timmy Johnny Spike, for example. Definitely check that out.
Yeah,
Uh,
that I remember that was a quote, and then alt tabbing back to Final Fantasy XI, and being like, "Whoa,
yeah,
he was
talk
right.
about
This
not
game
fun.
is just not even a little bit fun, but I'm still playing."
That's utter garbage. So, the restrictive play thing is often related to power level, but not always. So I think a really good example of, perhaps one of the best examples of restrictive play that was not a necessarily power level thing was old Quest Rogue.
Yeah, you were telling me about this. Do you have some numbers for us as well?
Yeah, so I don't have some exact numbers, but so prior to its balance change, prior to changing, Caverns Below to require 5 minions rather than 4, the deck had like a pretty close to average win rate, but proportional to its win. So, there's always going to be a relationship between a deck's win rate and how often it's being played. That's just like, that makes sense, right? Because a lot of players are going to want to play the deck with the highest win rate.
Hmm.
So, you expect a pretty tight correlation. And if there's an outlier, it's interesting at the very least. It's important to explain why there's an outlier. So this deck was an outlier because it was seeing a ton of play for its relatively average win rate, and that's because it had a whole suite of matchups that were completely free, and that was any control deck.
Yeah, there's no losing. Like if they're not gonna beat you before turn 5, they're gonna lose
Yeah, right. Like
one way or another.
you're gonna trigger the quest, and like you can slow roll them for the rest of the game, and there's no way they're gonna beat you because they can never get a tempo edge on you. Like they're always going to be reacting to the major threat that you just put out because you spent 2 mana and 2 cards to develop like 10 power, 5 of which has charge.
Yeah, you never stop drawing 5/5s. There's no control deck that actually beats that.
Yeah, exactly. So because that's like on the power level of their threats are roughly at that power level pretty often, like in terms of their ability to sort of push damage. But
Hmm.
your deck is just filled with them, and they all cost close to 0 mana. So this was this was a deck whose win rate wasn't that high. The reason is because this existed alongside Pirate Warrior. People are just like, okay, I'll play the meanest aggro deck that has perhaps ever existed in Hearthstone, or one of them, and you know perhaps second only to Aggro Shaman.
Hmm.
You could just play that deck, which everyone had and everyone knew was good and was like really tuned, and just absolutely crush Quest Rogues, just
Not
like
even
farm them.
close. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not even close. But like, as long as if the latter was ever in a position where it was roughly 50% control and 50% aggro, or like 50% sufficiently slow decks and 50% aggro, then you could play Quest Rogue and have a reasonable win rate. So this promoted aggro. This basically forced players into playing aggro so that they would have that auto win matchup, and so that they wouldn't have an auto lose matchup. And like that just deleted an entire suite of possible strategies that you could use on the ladder.
It's true. That and the inevitability that meant no fatigue strategy ever like was gonna be truly successful. There's sort of like a cap on how good a really slow deck could be, because if it gets too good, more people just start playing Quest Rogue and it's not good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Forget it. Fatigue can't exist in a world with Quest Rogue. Like, there are even fatigue decks now, but like that matchup is still probably really one sided.
Yeah, I just think that Quest Rogue's not nearly as popular right now as it was back then, partly
Of
because it
course
was
not. Yeah.
nerfed.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they reduced the power level of the deck pretty significantly. Although it is actually close to viable right now.
Yeah, I've been thinking about playing it, but one thing that might partly account for the difference in power level versus frequency of play is how few legendary cards you need to make the deck back then.
Oh, that is a real factor. Yeah,
It
you're right.
was the quest, and then I think that was it. There was no Sonya or anything like that. And there was a ton of commons. You did need preparations, which were epic, but really, it was a really inexpensive deck to make. And then, not only was it powerful for sure in some matchups, but it seemed really strong. It's got a powerful feeling to it, playing a bunch of 5/5 charges. Um, and then now there's a bunch more legendaries in it. That's why one of the reasons I haven't been playing it. I don't have the Death Knight or the 3-mana 2/2.
Zola.
Sonya. I
Sonya.
actually do have a Zola, but that's another legendary you need for the deck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't have I have been playing it around rank 3. I don't have Valera, but I do have Sonya and Zola, luckily. So I've been I don't know if it actually needs Valera. I feel like that helps a lot, but I haven't really. I've been triggering my quest without it. Though it's really good once you do trigger your quest.
It seems pretty strong.
Yeah, I think it's worth including. I sadly just really not going to go out of my way to craft it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that's an example of a deck that sort of promotes a restricted play style. In a way, I guess you could say that about old Spreading Plague. I think that perhaps punished going wide a little too hard, which is something that a lot of the aggro decks were doing at the time. So
yeah.
And also it was not fun to lose to Spreading Plague. Like, it felt terrible because you were in the situation of like, do you have it or do you don't? Do you have it or not? And do you don't? Like you get to this. Jeez.
I think we have an episode name now.
Do you don't? Do you have it or do you don't? So you're asking this question to your opponent now. Like, okay, well, I can hold back a lot of my threats and like just try to push damage with the strongest of my threats in case they have Spreading Plague, but then I could just force the game to go 2 or 3 turns longer and then lose to whatever they get to play after that. Or I have to just go wide, and if they have it, I scoop. And like, that's kind of an upsetting way to play Hearthstone. It's not really all that fun. I think it's okay when the card is something like, Hellfire, because these days the decks can push so much damage before turn 4 that, getting reset by, and have a lot of Divine Shields and stuff, so getting reset by Hellfire is not terrible, but Spreading Plague is just like, these decks just couldn't beat it.
Yeah, well, there's also like counterplay with Hellfire. You can give your minion 4 health or Divine Shield or something like that, but you just get wrecked by Spreading Plague no matter what. Like if you play as though you're trying to win, then you just get completely punished. And losing to Quest Rogue also doesn't feel good. I think that like this is as much as the real power level is important, we can also look at Quest Rogue and be like, well, it actually was not overpowered, but people felt bad, and we want people to have fun playing our game.
Yeah,
so that's exactly. Another reason that Blizzard has to do balance changes sometimes.
Yeah, so I think that these are that's the thing, is like, restrictive play is ultimately related to fun, because I think like it's not necessarily a problem if people are playing your game a particular way. That's just a metagame, and that exists in any game. But it's important that the way in which they're playing your game is enjoyable, and it could be unenjoyable if it's really stale, or if it's just like coin flippy, or just the players feel like the wins are outside of their control, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. You could definitely say that the game will be less fun if the strategies are restricted, because then you don't get to do what you want, like, for sure, and that doesn't feel like... One of the fun things about a game like Hearthstone is you can just make whatever kind of deck you want. So if the meta is restrictive, that's definitely going to be especially unfun for the players that are really into, designing decks. There's probably some subset of players that don't really care that the options are restricted, and they just like playing the best deck and winning. but that's definitely not everybody.
No, of course.
But I think also just a card can feel bad to lose to, and it's not even as deep. It doesn't necessarily also have to be as deep as classes and decks are being restricted, but just losing to Quest Rogue for the 5th time in a row as a control deck feels really crappy.
Oh yeah, it can make build around cards feel like a trap.
Yeah. So that's just another reason I think they nerfed the card, even though it wasn't overpowered, is just because it was making people not have fun.
Yeah, I mean that is really, really important for consideration for longevity of the game, which is something we all want. Like
absolutely.
If this game stopped being fun, you wouldn't play it. So having a nerf that's aimed at making the game more fun, even if you can't. Even if maybe you don't think it's too fun, or like a lot of your friends don't, like maybe on average it will create a more fun situation according to their sort of best judgment. So this is a real consideration. It's from a business perspective, but ultimately has to do with your Hearthstone experience, just like a power level ability nerf. So it's like that, because that's the ultimate criteria. All of these criteria are secondary to the player experience. So a nerf that is like directly exclusively for reasons of player experience is actually really sensible in that framework.
For sure.
So with all these things in mind, these sort of three, power level, design space, and restricted play, unfun play, we want to think about some of the possible nerf targets. So there's been a little bit of discussion and sort of communication from Blizzard about what cards might see nerfs or what cards they've been thinking about balancing.
They've made clear that they are looking to do some balance changes at the end of the month after the HCT. That's why we're talking about all this right now. That's not a maybe at this point. They definitely said that, and there's also some specific cards they mentioned.
Yeah, so they mentioned a bunch of cards, and I think that we wanted to mention maybe a subset of those cards and discuss why they might be changed. So. It's actually not the first on the list that we have written down in front of us, but the one that I want to mention first is Naga Sea Witch. Just because that card's
going wild.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of an outlier in that respect, because I think all of these others are more considered for standard, but even standard players, exclusively standard players now, are aware of this card and how dumb it is. So Naga Sea Witch is a 5-mana 5/5 that makes all of your cards cost 5, and they shadow changed this like some number of patches ago, maybe close to a year ago, where that cost reduction is applied before the cost reduction that comes from like giant effects and stuff like that. So now if you have 25 life, your Molten Giant costs 0 mana if you play Naga Sea Witch. So it's dumb, yeah. Or like, you have 5 cards in hand, your Mountain Giant costs 0. Like, it's pretty obvious why that could be strong, because now you just have a turn 5 enabler that can let you play a bunch of 8/8s, and like, this is Hearthstone, that's a way to win. So a lot of players have been pretty upset about Naga Sea Witch related decks, because they're really not all that fun to play against. It sucks when you're trying to play a fair game of Hearthstone and then you're just facing down 5 8/8s. And like,
yeah, that's not going to work out.
Yeah, and they're not, traditionally, if somebody tries to set up a ridiculous board, you have Devolve, even Shaman's a real deck. You can deal with that board in some way. You have like hard removal, but that's all at 6, 7, or 8 mana. Board wipe hard removal like Light Bomb or Psychic Scream or Twisting Nether. But those are like kind of the only things that can beat a good turn 5 Sea Witch. Like, pretty much everything else has to concede to it. And that sucks. That's not that fun to have to be able to do those sorts of things in order to beat this type of strategy.
It has a non-50 win rate, right? It's actually pretty strong.
Yeah, it's actually a good deck. It's not like Quest Rogue. It's this deck is like, it has a very high win rate in Wild. I don't know if it's like the tippity top because it has such a big target on its head, but I definitely think it's like setting the pace of what the other decks look like.
It's extremely strong and very unfun.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it is a power level consideration. It's also, players just hate losing to it. So that's because it's not like you make a ton of plays and feel good about it. Like you're playing Warlock and you press your hero power twice, and then on turn 4, you coin out your Sea Witch, and like that's it. It's the game. So
Spaghetti.
yeah, it's not like really that fun to do that unless you just love winning, which a lot of us do. I've actually played this deck for like 100 games, so I love winning. But it's it's just really too strong for what it does. So I wanted to mention that first, just because it's hard to imagine a world where they don't change that.
Yeah, I mean, they could just change the interaction back. I don't even know why they did that, and haven't done anything about it yet. But it's kind of like questless quest rogue, or no, it's like quest rogue, but your quest is play one Naga Sea Witch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because like the other thing is just how this deck is built. It's funny to look at some of these really degenerate decks because they just the lists themselves look hilarious. This one does too. It's just like Defiles, Hellfires, and then like just threats. Like that's it. You're running like one Shadow Flame, the sort of cheap board wipe suite that I'd mentioned, like some Librarians, Mistress of Mixtures, and then just like 8 Giants, Mal'Ganis, Void Lords, Void Caller, and Blood Reaper Gul'dan. It's just like it's really hilarious.
Just all the most unfair stuff from the standard Warlock decks, plus
Yes,
8 giants.
right. Yeah, it's really funny. So I just wanted to mention that one first, just because it's not odd one out. But why don't you pull something from this list we could talk about it?
Sure. I think a good one to talk about is Call to Arms. That card's insane.
Yeah.
So it gives you can get 6 mana worth of minions for 4 mana. That's kind of obviously a little powerful. But it also it's restrictive because really doing anything in Paladin without Call to Arms just doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, that's true.
It's been seeming like everything that like the odd Paladin suffers really badly from not being able to use Call to Arms.
Yes, I agree with that.
And so it's restricting what Paladin can do, and it's really, really powerful. So it's sort of, and it's one of the ones they mentioned. So I could see them doing something. I don't know what they would do. They could maybe make it cost 5.
Yeah, so I think making it cost 5 or 6 would make sense. I think we understated the power level here because it's not just 6 mana worth of minions because like that's a 6/6. It's 6 mana and 3 cards worth of minions. Because like when you factor in a card's cost, it's implicit. This is like less obvious, but this is generally true in every card game. When you play a card, you remove a card from your hand. You're reducing the size of your hand by 1, so that is part of the cost. It's true of every single card, with the exception of cards that say draw a card on them. But that is like it's something that you have to consider when you're evaluating the cost of the card. So when you play Call to Arms and you pull out 3 2-drops, you got 6 mana and 3 cards worth of minions for 1 card. So it tends to not just be a 6/6, it tends to be something much better than that.
Yep. The 2-drops have been changing. There's like a time where they're using Vicious Scalehide, which was nice because it can attack immediately. Now I'm seeing a lot of Amani Berserker.
Yep.
I see a Millhouse Mana Storm come out every now and then, which is not fun.
That's hilarious. That was like the piloted Shredder high roll back in the day.
Oh yeah, and then there's Doomsayer.
Oh yeah,
at the other end.
Yeah, and stuff like Loot Horror. It's actually been pretty hilarious. Like I think that the rotation really spoke to the power level of this card because now Paladin's like, do I run Amani Berserker or Plated Beetle? And even Paladin is still just like one of the best decks. But like those are the choices it has.
Then the odd Paladin is using like Stormwind Champion.
Yeah, it's pretty
Raid
funny.
Leader.
Yeah, it's I really appreciate that in general.
Me too.
Yeah, like I like seeing cards that I think are terrible, and then I would just give like a 1 out of 5, and just seeing them like end up in standard decks that can climb to legend is hilarious and awesome.
It's great. I'm glad that's an example of doing a very good job.
Yes. So there's another so Call to Arms. I think like if I had to sort of put money on it, I would it'd be this or Possess Lackey, I think, in terms of the cards that that I think are like the highest likelihood of getting nerfed. Like if I wanted to bet on a card being nerfed, it'd be one of those two. Probably Call to
Hmm.
Arms. There's another consideration, which is now if they decide, like, let's say Hunter's not doing particularly well, it hasn't been doing well for a while. Neither is Shaman. Maybe they want to help these classes out by giving them some synergistic 2-drop that's neutral. Now Paladin has access to it and puts in the Call to Arms deck, and the Call to Arms deck just got better.
Yeah, it limits design space.
Exactly. Yes. So this means that now anytime they decide to print a good neutral 2-drop or a good 2-drop in Paladin, it makes Call to Arms a better card. And that's like a really terrifying prospect because the card's already insane.
Yeah, anything with like charge, like they got to be a lot more tentative with, for example.
Yeah, or Rush or Divine Shield or Taunt. Like all of these things, maybe they want to give, maybe they wanted to make like a Beast with Taunt. It's like a 2/3 for 2 or something. I mean, that'd probably just be a class card. But maybe they had a bunch of interesting class cards planned for Hunter, and they wanted to make it neutral. Now it just makes Paladin better. So this like puts a pretty severe restriction on what they can and can't do. And they also like the thing is that's actually more problematic than it sounds because you could just say like, oh well, don't print good 2-drops. So for considerations in like Arena and stuff like that, they're going to want to have a suite of different costs in any given set, a suite of different costs and effects. Otherwise, certain cards might appear more often than they should, or they might have to appear more often than they should, which would make the games appear more homogenous than they should be.
Yeah, there's like, and then you're just gonna lose to Paladin if you don't have any good 2-drops.
Yeah, right. Like if in the worst case, like it's hard to get a 2-drop in Arena for your Arena deck, and that'll sort of hurt the format a little bit. Or you just like you'll have access to just the same 2-drops over and over again because they had to mess with the offering weights such that you are constantly offered like a classic 2-drop or something. But anyway, that's a real consideration. That this card severely restricts your design space.
Yep, and Possessed Lackey also does kind of restrict Warlock design space, and they've been dabbling more in printing neutral demons.
That is true, yeah.
Which is also limited by Possessed Lackey.
Interestingly, yeah. So it's curious because like Demon's been one of those types that they haven't really put in neutral, and I think that the reason wasn't because like demons are special and they should be in Warlock only. I think it's just because Warlock is the only class with any demon synergy, so it just almost made no sense to put them in neutral.
Yeah,
but
it's really fun.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that Magic does all the time. Is they'll print some blue creature that's a cleric when cleric is normally limited to black and white, just because they want to spread out your opportunities to make these synergies and make these decks that care about creature types. And that's really fun.
Oh yeah, or like Green Merfolk in Ixalan.
Yeah. But if you just... The only Green Merfolk I played historically was Tarmogoyf.
Sure.
But that is actually the best Merfolk ever printed.
Right.
So the demons, like, if they overdid it, like if from the get-go every minion had a minion type and there were a ton of different ones, it wouldn't feel as special. That's what Yu-Gi-Oh did.
Right.
And like they didn't have enough room to make all of them relevant, so it just seemed like it was a mostly irrelevant thing. And that's sort of what it would have been at the beginning of the game, because I need cards that do stuff not with minion types first as like the base, and then after they build up their game a bit, they can start getting wacky with things like Nightmare Amalgam.
Right.
But I think it makes sense that they couldn't, or it wasn't a good idea to be making a bunch of neutral demons at the beginning. But I'm really glad that they're dabbling in it now. No, I don't think many of them have been very good yet. I guess Void Ripper's cool.
Yeah, I think it has potential. It's like it's an enabler, right? So that card could just randomly see play if there was a good enough payoff.
Yeah, I definitely like the card. It's definitely a strong effect that can either be used in a combo, or if you're just seeing way too many Mana-Tai Totems and Doomsayers. I think it's cool in that way. But if they wanted to make a nice fat one, they would have to, and who doesn't love a nice fat one? They would have to be careful about Possessed Lackey. Like, they certainly aren't. If they had thoughts about printing another demon with charge, They're not thinking about it right now.
Oh yeah, forget it. No way. They'll never do that. Yeah, not
And there are
not with
no
this
demons
lucky.
with Rush, right?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
So maybe they already, like, their design space already got affected.
Yeah, that's plausible. So that's something that's like really serious. I think that like whether you're thinking about putting a really powerful and expensive, or just steeply costed, we won't say expensive, steeply costed, uh, demon into either warlock or neutral, you now have this possessed lackey consideration because, yeah, it's really good and it could just help get around the cost. So
And there's also, like, if you're thinking, well, they printed Void Caller, and that wasn't a problem. You still had to have the demon in your hand. Possessed Lackey just gets it from your deck. You just
yeah,
need to put it in your list, and he gets it.
so
That's very different from Void Caller.
yes, that is absolutely true. Void Caller is still amazing, still definitely, sees play in all the Warlock decks in Wild. Really good card. But
Oh yeah.
Possessed Lackey is also good for that reason. So this is really serious. So like Possessed Lackey, in addition to the limitations it has in design space, it's actually just obscenely powerful. This is something I think is like a lot of players are probably aware of because they've been playing against Warlock so often. But let's just spell out exactly what this card does. For the reasons you identified, this card is effectively a 5-mana Void Lord or a 5-mana Doomguard with no additional costs. Because you no longer have to have this, like you said, you no longer have to draw those cards. You can mulligan them. You don't have to keep them in your hand so that you can cheat them out with like Void Caller or something. You can just throw them back in your deck, play Possessed Lackey, run it into literally any minion, and then get out your 9-mana minion on turn 6, and then cube it and Dark Pact it because you have 6 mana.
Yeah, that's another thing about him that's so ridiculous is the synergy with Carnivorous Cube. Like, cheating out this really big minion really early is that much more obscene when you're also going to cube it.
Yes. So actually, I have just as a quick aside, I have a funny anecdote. So yesterday I was playing a Warlock Mirror. I was playing Cube. My opponent was playing Control. So they played Rin and they popped Rin with Dark Pact. And I was like, at that point, I had just played what did I do? I had a Possessed Lackey out and it was like turn 9-ish. So they had they popped their Rin and I still hadn't really started going off. So I had my Possessed Lackey on board. I played Umbra and Carnivorous Cube on my Possessed Lackey. So Possessed Lackey died, I got a demon. And then, Umbra triggered on my Carnivorous Cube, gave me 2 more lackeys, which then triggered from my Umbra and got out all my demons. So like at this point I went from having none of my demons summoned to all of my demons summoned, and I had Gul'dan in hand. So like I was just thinking like, man, I need to get my stuff going fast. And then just like in one turn I like did all of the precursor stuff for Gul'dan and proceeded to just overrun my opponent before they played a single seal.
Wow.
Yeah, it felt amazing.
That is ridiculous.
It was cool. I never saw that synergy until that turn. Like that was the first time I had ever really cubed a Possessed Lackey. Like once I knew how to play the deck.
Yeah, that it doesn't come up nearly as often.
Yeah,
it's usually not a good idea.
Yeah. It's usually like a pretty weak play, and you're usually better off just holding a cube. But in this particular case, it was like a really excellent play.
The Umbra summoned 2 more lackeys, which also got Umbred.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. It felt sweet. But anyway, like, so Possessed Lackey is just a way to cheat on costs. Generally it gets around Doomguard's discard. It gets around the mana cost of Void Lord. So this, and we've said this like so many times in the past. Cheating on mana is one of the most powerful things you can do in card games, and that's definitely true in Hearthstone.
These minions are just so good. Like, Doomguard is good against everything. Voidlord is good against everything. There's no deck that doesn't care about your opponent, cheating a bunch of those out. And it can also be really ridiculous with Blood Reaver Gul'dan.
Yeah.
If you actually do, if they don't have the answer, they just get punished to oblivion, because that's when you start doing, cube things, and once you've made extra copies of your Doomguard, now your Blood Reaver Gul'dan's going to be insane. And
right.
So any deck that doesn't have the answer really gets punished, and they're getting punished by someone who's cheating on 5 mana.
Yeah, and it's just like that's It's a little bit strong. I think like in pretty much all of the Warlock strategies right now, there's two possessed lackeys. It's like even finding its way into wild lists where
Hmm.
Warlock decks are a lot tighter in Wild because of the card pool being huge and like the power level of the cards just being through the roof. But Lackey's still finding its way into those lists, so it's I think it's a pretty strong contender for a nerf.
Yeah, that's another one that they mentioned, and it pretty much falls into all three categories. Again, too strong, uh, limits design space, and it can be really unfun to lose to.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's like the holy trinity. So let's talk a little bit about Void Lord. It's related to Possessed Lackey.
Yeah, so I think the classic thing is like some early turn you lackey, and then you get a demon and cube it and play Dark Pact. And that's really degenerate and unfair. We can all kind of agree on that. It's obviously way too much stuff really early. Um, but which piece of the puzzle is the problem?
Hmm.
And they being Blizzard, um, listed Doomguard, Dark Pact, Possessed Lackey, even Blood Reaver Gul'dan, which also ultimately relates to that whole massive stuff you play on turn 6. Did they mention... They did not mention Carnivorous Cube. I don't think Carnivorous Cube is the problem, but
Same.
they didn't mention Void Lord, and I feel like you could easily argue that Void Lord is the main problem. It gives you a ton of health, so it's going to be 9 health and taunt, plus the 3 minions, which each have 3, so you're going to get 18 health and taunt from this minion. So it really shuts down any aggressive strategy, but there's also supposed to be ways to fight back against a really big, scary taunt minion, right?
Right.
There's supposed to be interaction. You're supposed to be playing with your opponent. And Void Lord really just isn't weak to anything that is classically given to these classes that are going to play aggressive decks. Silencing it is good, but really only if you're finishing them off that turn. Because if they cheat out a Void Lord and you silence it, well, then they're going to cube Dark Pact.
Yeah, or kill it and then Gul'dan. And then
Yeah,
still back.
or it still winds up coming back, and when you play Gul'dan and get 5 armor and at least 1 Void Lord, your aggressive opponent almost always has to scoop to that.
Right.
And so silencing it doesn't work, and then if you spend a card killing it, they still get the babies. So it's sort of inherently resilient to removal. And then also because of Carnivorous Cube and Blood Reaver Gul'dan, silencing it doesn't really do anything either. So whether or not that's an example of it being too powerful is hard to say, but it definitely feels bad that there's just nothing you can do about it. And it's a lot like losing to Spreading Plague.
So
when Spreading Plague was 5 mana.
Yeah, so my I mean, I do agree with you. I think that, Void Lord is obviously very powerful. It's in all of the Warlock lists in Standard, and actually even the Giants lock list has 2 Void Lords in it. Like, it's, in Wild. So this is very clearly a strong card and a huge payoff, and, like, I think anyone would be remiss to fail to acknowledge that. Like, but on the other hand, I think that a lot of the problem with the Warlock decks is just related to how early they come out, because, like, before the call I had mentioned, I compared this a little bit to Obsidian Statue. Like, a turn 9 Obsidian Statue feels fair. It's just when it comes out turn 4 or 5 that it feels really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think the same is kind of true of Void Lord. Like, if you get to 9 mana, like, you should be allowed to play, this card, which isn't really a huge threat on its own. It's just a big wall. But it's not even a wall that you can't, like, punch through. You can do it. So, I think
I've done it many times.
Yeah, same here. I think it's a fair, it's really easy to punch through with Giants.
I bet.
So, I think it's a fair 9 mana card, but the problem is when it's a 5 mana card.
Yeah, the thing is just there's more than one way it's getting cheated out.
It's true,
and I don't think they're gonna like ban Possessed Lackey. Uh, and like, the most logical thing to do with Lackey would either be increase its cost or change its effect. And I think its effect is cool. I think just like Void Lord on its own, fair card. Pay 9 mana for this guy, have fun. Possess Lackey, 5 mana 2/2 that has a deck restriction. Doesn't sound overpowered to me. I don't
Sure.
see a problem here. I think both cases you can kind of just look at them on their own and it's okay. But then Skull of the Minari, sure, why not? Cheat out a demon. But like that, both of those relate to Void Lord. Like those are both broken largely because of what you cheat out. And I think those effects are fun, and also in a very similar way, fair in the way Void Lord is fair.
That is true. So this is a little bit like the argument that people would make that Patron's the problem and Commander shouldn't have got the axe, because it's like the reason, at the time the Patron deck wasn't named the Commander deck, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely, the Grim Patrons were part of the reason that the deck was just so like obscene and annoying. And there are actually a lot of games you could win with Grim Patron without the Commander, and still Patron actually is a deck. Not really an amazing one, but definitely like it saw play. At the time post nerf. It was weaker, but still okay. So, you could make similar arguments for Void Lord here. But I think that the difference is like it's hard to know where to put the power level blame, because the power level of Possess Lackey and Void Lord is the same. The cards they have the same effect effectively. Because
Yeah.
Lackey's a means to your Void Lord, and your Void Lord is obviously the Void Lord. So, but the problem is like, I think that Lackey's also a means to other things. Like you had identified as a design space restrictor. And it also can pull out your Doom Guards, which can do degenerate things also. So
Yep.
I think that kind of pushes it over the edge. And also it does all that early. Like, again, I think that the mana consideration is real. As a 9 mana card, Void Lord's still pretty strong and might even see play with, like, in a world with Blood Reaver Gul'dan. Just if you had to pay 9 mana for it, you might just play it.
Right.
But I think that it's just a problem. I think that's okay, because like whenever I have to play 9 mana Void Lord, I'm foregoing doing anything else that turn. I'm foregoing like drawing more cards, or cubing anything or summoning anything, in some other way. But when I play Possess Lackey on turn 5, I'm not really missing out on much at all.
Yeah, it's like, I think you could also easily argue that Doomguard is more degenerate than Void Lord. Like,
yeah, potentially.
As much as I think it probably the most degenerate part of Lackey is that you can get Void Lord, because Doomguard will put a control deck in a scary spot. They'll be scared, and they'll really want to kill it because they don't want you cubing it. And if you're against aggro, you start to punch their guys with a Doomguard. And then with Void Lord, if you happen to hit your Void Lords off of Possess Lackey, that'll once again be like scary to the control deck because they don't want you to cube it, and you get to start punching them. But it's just like GG to the aggro deck usually.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, like you said, even if you silence it, you could just like get it back. Unsilence it with cube.
Yeah, and it's because it's so early.
Yeah.
If it came out turn 7, you could silence it and finish them off probably. But they might have just cheated it out turn 5 and gained 8 life. So, so now maybe the problem's Dark Pact, right?
Yeah, that's also possible. I mean, Dark Pact is a card that is also seeing multi-format play right now, and it does something. It does something really. It kind of thwart. So it's interesting. I think having life gain in Warlock is fine, but having it, and I think having it cost 1 mana if it comes with an additional steep cost is also fine. However, this doesn't really come with a cost in this deck.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
It's a combo piece. Every single part of this card is a good thing. And in a way, like, I think that's fine too. If you have a card that has a cost that you can turn into a benefit in some, combo deck, that's fine. But you should be paying. You have to, the money's got to come from somewhere. You have to eventually pay for that, like, because maybe your combo deck opens you up in some other way. But this card actually just does everything you want. It enables your combo against slow decks. It keeps you alive against fast decks, and like you're never actually paying for that in any other place except for like, you're not running as many taunt minions, but who cares? You're running Possessed Lackey and Void Lord.
Void Lord's all you need.
Yeah, exactly.
But we've been talking about, turn 5 Void Lords or turn 6 Void Lords, and if Dark Pact costs 2, that all goes back a turn, and you don't even have to adjust any card that says Demon on it.
That's true. I mean, I don't often pact my lackeys, I guess, unless I'm in an aggro matchup, but definitely if Dark Pact costs 2, that would make the deck a lot weaker. Also, because you couldn't just hard cast Void Lord and play Dark Pact on the same turn.
Yeah, and that kind of play I think is mostly good against aggressive decks. That's what you do when you're like, as long as I don't die, I win. I have Gul'dan in my hand.
Right.
So I'm just going to do this really defensive play and blow my Dark Pact just because I can't lose if I do that.
Right.
And that's really how you completely blow them out with Lackey, I think, by getting the Void Lord super early. Because if you just play the Lackey, they can silence it. See, that has counterplay. A silenced Possessed Lackey is way worse than a silenced Void Lord.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, because the 3/9 is a real minion, a 2/2 is not.
So you would sort of have to, as the Warlock player, be like, well, do I play my Lackey now and risk getting it silenced, or do I wait? Now the do I wait option is 2 turns instead of 1. And that can be really costly against an aggressive deck.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, these are all considerations, and it's interesting to see where they'll go. I don't know. In my heart of hearts, I feel like the Dark Pact is an okay card, and I feel like it's also necessary for Warlock to have access to at least one reasonably powerful life gain effect, because they seem to have been leaning into Warlock leveraging its health as a resource, finally, as opposed to discarding cards. It's frustrating because I think that's a different discussion. I'm happy they're finally doing that.
Me too.
So I feel like that was the obvious choice from the get-go, and I'm surprised that it took them so long.
They did a good job. Things like the Spellstone are really great.
Yeah, I mean, once they executed it really well. That's awesome. I'm really happy they're doing it. They're a great design team. Yeah, so I feel like it's necessary for them to have at least one powerful life gain spell in order for the classes to sort of have its identity. But again, it is proving to be a problem right now, so that might be the card that has to get the axe. They might have to go back to the drawing board. And people are playing Shroom apparently.
Yep, that's been showing up. You called it. Very nicely done. But, I think Dark Pact, if it costs 2, would still be pretty strong.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And it would slow down the deck a lot. I'm not promoting this because I really love Dark Pact. I usually like the combo pieces more than the combo, and I really like Dark Pact as a combo piece. So I hope they leave it alone, but if they're trying to add a turn to how quickly all this happens, they could do it by increasing the cost of Dark Pact, but they could also do it by increasing the cost of Possessed Lackey.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of routes they could take. It'll be interesting to see what they do. So another card that I think I actually mentioned during the interview is Spiteful Summoner. So
yeah, it's not happy fun time summoner.
Yeah, so I think that this is I actually think this card is more or less balanced on a power level perspective. I think it was Kurt during the interview, when I brought this card up, made the counterpoint that it's a deck building restriction, and that's 100% true. Is that from a power level point of view, in order to turn Spiteful Summoner into this massive 6-mana bomb, you need to actually pay a really huge deck building cost. You need to basically run 26 to 28 minions, and your only spells have to just be huge clunkers. So you're not you're removing your deck's access to a lot of tools, removal spells and draw spells and stuff like that, and just hoping you can have minions that can do the things that you're missing. However, I think that even if it's balanced in power level, I think that the way in which Spiteful Summoner wins games is maybe a bad experience for a lot of players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the unfun balance.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's I also think that there's an interesting there's an interesting way to think about balancing decks. So you can think about it like all of my, a balanced deck might have a bunch of okay matchups, some worse than others, but all matchups are winnable. A deck might also have some matchups that are unlosable and some matchups that are unwinnable. So actually, I think Quest Rogue falls in the latter category, and maybe like even Paladin falls in the former category.
Sure.
So Quest Rogue, this is a deck that like imagine fighting a Fatigue Warrior, like an like Baku Warrior or something like that. Like that just seems like you could probably pass your turn for the first 6 turns and win.
You could just roll dice on which cards to play and stuff.
Yeah, right. Like you're gonna be. I mean, as long as you trigger your quest, yes. Like,
you will eventually.
So this is that would be really easy. But Matt, like, I don't know, if anybody has had the misfortune of playing Quest Rogue into Secret Mage. That is like, that is one of the worst matchups I'm aware of in Hearthstone.
Oh my god, it's brutal.
Like, every one of their secrets is GG. Like, they play Secret, you're like, well, if this is Counterspell, I lose, and if it's Explosive Runes, I lose. Like, and they did this on turn 3, I guess I'm scooping. Like, it's just, you have no survivability, you have no way of, like, dealing with any of their threats, and this is a deck that actually is just trying to stick, like, 1 4-mana minion and then kill you with burn spells, so, like, they do that for free every game. All of their secrets basically, like, they slow down your combo by a turn, and it's just, like, an insanely terrible matchup. And, like, having a deck like that is not really an amazing experience, and I think that Spiteful Summoner is kind of close to that. But it's not really a matchup dependent thing. It's more like, well, the games I draw Spiteful Summoner and play it on curve, or slightly ahead of curve, and I high roll a minion are just free. Like the 12/12 and targetable. Like that's it. That's the game. Because there aren't a lot of, like, in the metagame right now, there's not really a whole lot of answers to that.
No, there are not.
Yeah. But then there's the games where you don't draw your Spiteful, you don't draw your Kelesith, and you just are like an arena deck. And you lose.
Yeah, you're playing really medium minions the whole game while your opponent actually does good stuff. And then if you're lucky, you high roll them with an ultimate infestation.
Yeah.
And otherwise you lose.
Yeah, and I think that those sorts of games are not that fun because that comes down to do you have it or do you don't? So
right. Do you have it or do you don't have the UI? I had also said in response to the deck restriction fact, like, if you're going to be restricted to one spell,
Ultimate Infestation's the one.
It's like true. Almost not a deck restriction.
Yeah,
I have to use 2 Ultimate Infestations? Oh, no.
Well, yeah, but I mean, of course, like, it actually is, right? Because you can't run Wild Growth or Nourish or anything.
Yeah, Nourish, you really miss having Nourish in that deck.
Yeah, so this is, Nourish would actually be excellent, really, in the Spiteful deck, in particular.
You're kind of playing, your Nourish is your taunt minions. You're like, I'll get 2 mana if I slow the game down with these idiots.
Yeah, right. so it's, I think that card might see a balance. I also, in a way, it restricts design space for them a tiny bit, because they have to be careful which classes they give access to really expensive spells now.
Yeah. 9 is also a really degenerate number. There's no spells that cost 9 right now, but if there were one, you could hit things like Ysera and Obsidian Statue, and that could be even more disgusting than Tarantus.
Yeah, or Void Lord.
Yep. I mean, the 9 spot is hot. Malygos.
Yeah, 9's really good. It's just, that is, like, those. It's not a power level consideration. I don't think it is, at least. I think that these decks are pretty fair. I think that they're not the most powerful decks out there, and I don't think they have oppressive matchups. But I do think that they're a little bit too high rolly to really, like, exist in a way that is not going to piss off players.
Yeah.
And again, this is a really important criterion. At the end of the day, all balance considerations are secondary to, are your players having fun? So, even if something was too powerful, you would never nerf it if it made the game not fun.
Right. And also, like, even playing the deck can be pretty unfun if you draw both your ultimate infestations.
Yeah,
you want to shoot yourself.
Yeah, or you just, you low roll your 10, or, like, it's just not a that's a really bad thing. So I think that that's a consideration just from fun perspective and design space restriction perspective. Though I will miss playing Spiteful Paladin with Dino Size. I did a lot last season. It was a really greedy deck. I could make it to rank 5 and then not really past. One of those.
Yeah, one of those.
So, I think we have like one more card in this list that could see a change potentially, and that's Caverns Below.
This is another one that they mentioned.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of this as a card that needs a nerf until they said it.
Same. I think, yeah, I don't. I'm still not sold on it, actually. Like, I don't think that they should necessarily change it, but then again, we have another year of living with this card, so
it's true.
It's hard to imagine. You know, it could be that they want to promote a world where Caverns would be excellent. Like they wanted to slow the game down a little bit, and in the next expansion, and there's ways they could do that. They just print a bunch of really good taunt. If you print another Tar Creeper, right? Like they can. It would not be hard for them to slow down the pace of Hearthstone by just printing a few, seeding a few cards here and there.
Right.
But Caverns Below would just get so much better if they did that. So in a way, it's a design space restriction. But also, it's really crappy to queue into Rogue and hear the quest sound when you're playing a slow deck.
Yep, that's why I was just thinking like of the only things that need balance are the things that are too strong, but apparently this is still something people are playing enough that they're making enough people feel bad about it.
Yeah, I think actually in the most recent VS report, it's in their third tier, so it's actually seeing enough play to be on the list. It does have a sub 50% win rate overall, and ranks 4-1. Yeah, that's in overall and in ranks 4-1. So it's like not really an amazing deck. It's kind of just like in the meat of mediocre decks, but it's seeing enough play.
I think another quality about it is it's a really skill-dependent deck. I think that you can actually win a lot more matches against aggressive decks if they play badly enough and you play well enough.
I agree with that.
And I think a lot of pro players, specifically streamers, will play it and did play it when it came out, and that's another reason why it was popular, is people were seeing streamers play it and win, and they were like, oh, well, that deck's amazing, I want to play that too. And then the win rate became averaged with those people trying as well. But the popularity was partly from seeing these pro players play it, and they were having some success, and that's why so many people tried to copy them.
Yeah, it's an interesting deck. I think it gets this reputation for being solitaire, and I think it's the closest thing to solitaire that we have in Hearthstone right now. But
most likely,
it is. It's not strictly solitaire for sure. The
Certainly
deck
not.
definitely has a lot of conditional lines of play, and even a lot of solitaire lines that are hard to see. Especially those that involve like, vanishing or doing ridiculous stuff with Sonya and Shadow Step and all that stuff.
I think it's a cool deck, and it's, they already nerfed the card one time. It's kind of crazy to me that Ixar specifically said from the Quest Rogue deck, the card we're thinking about changing is the Caverns Below.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they said, well, we decided Sonya if we change that, or we changed Stone Tusk Boar, or some other card in the deck. It's the card they already nerfed.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. Are there any other examples of that? I don't know.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, my intuition tells me that there is, but maybe there is not. Well, anyway, that's something, listeners, you can tweet at us and let us know.
Yeah, any card that got nerfed more than once. It's possible that there's something that, like, they changed how it works and it wasn't really a nerf. Because secrets used to be able to go off during your turn.
Oh, I see.
So the trick was to get your opponent to 15 when you're at 30, and then play eye for an eye and Alex yourself.
That's amazing.
And you take 15, trigger your secret, it deals 15 to them.
That's really dumb. I love it.
I've seen a few videos of it, but that was a long time ago. So I don't even know if like they changed fundamentally how secrets work, and as a result, eye for an eye got weaker. Does that even count as a nerf to eye for an eye? Probably not. But there's probably some example of that maybe, where they changed the rules and the card got worse, and then they also had to nerf it later. There might be an example of that, but I still can't think of one.
Yeah. I'm not. Nothing's jumping to mind right now. But anyway, that is really pretty. That's pretty hilarious that they missed twice.
I mean, what would they do now? Just make it 4/4s?
They might just neuter the card and just undertune it like 4/4s or 3/3s or like make it 6 or 7 minions or something. I feel like if they're going to do it again, they're going to just give it the axe. They might even completely rework it, but I think that's pretty unlikely.
That would be. I would prefer that over the axe.
Same here, most definitely. Me too.
Over the Fiery War axe.
Yeah, I would prefer because it would be like a new card or a new strategy as opposed to removing a strategy, and I think that every player should prefer that.
Yeah, that would be. They could easily make it something related to class cards or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
I would take that.
Oh, yeah, that'd be really neat. That'd be interesting. It'd be interesting in general to see them revisit the quest mechanic because I think that they undertuned them this time. So I'd like to see what they look like tuned correctly.
Yeah, I guess so. One card they did completely rework is Warsong Commander, right? That's just completely different effect now.
Yes, yeah, totally different card.
That's probably the least common nerf that they do.
Yeah, a lot of other games. I mean, League of Legends being a stellar example, are really they rework pretty often. Overwatch is another example of actually a Blizzard game that reworks pretty often, but in Hearthstone they almost never rework. It's interesting actually. They kind of keep all these old mantras from these other card games when they're not necessarily applicable because it's a digital card game. But then again, I mean, it's hard to imagine reworking individual cards when you have a whole new set with 150 new cards to print.
Yeah, and part of the feeling of the game is maintained by keeping some of those physical card rules intact.
That's true.
If your collection was constantly fluctuating, I mean, that wouldn't feel good.
Yeah, it's true. I think that's definitely true. It would feel. I mean, that's also true in like League where you own champions and stuff. But for the most part, that's. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that new cards are released at a much higher rate than new champions in League or new heroes in Overwatch are released. So it's not exactly a fair comparison in that respect. And yeah, I guess if like your favorite cards were just changing, it would ruin some of your decks, and that would feel bad too.
And it just wouldn't feel like you have a book full of cards. Like that's definitely part of what it feels like to play Hearthstone. I think that's important.
I think you're right.
That's the prime directive, the player experience.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. It's marketed as a collectible card game. It's treated like one. It has an economy like one. So, I think that's a really good point. But do you think that's a good place to wrap up?
It is nice they do change things sometimes.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think balance changes are necessary in pretty much any game in the live service era. So it's really nice to see that they do that.
I'm not even completely sold that they do need to make a change at the end of the month, but I guess like watch the HCTs and see what if everyone is Quest Rogue, then that might be a sign to Blizzard and a sign to us that that's one of the decks they're gonna axe.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can probably get if you want a really good idea of what they're gonna change, you probably get a lot of information from what's happening at that tournament.
Yeah, that is always a good source of information. So that's certainly true. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you can catch us on Twitter, twitter.com/LastTurnHS, or facebook.com/LastTurnHS. Hopefully you do not catch me on the ambulance in the background. But in the event that I'm not on that ambulance, you can also find us on iTunes or Google Play, or you can go to lastturnhs.com to have links to all of these profiles. We have a profile on Podbean right now, but I don't think that any of our episodes are hosted there. So if you want to go directly to our hosting service, you should go to soundcloud.com/lastturn. So another thing that Evan does that's awesome is our YouTube channel, which is you can find uploads of all of our episodes there, and our set reviews have card art and stuff for the stuff that we talk about because we frequently forget to define the card.
Yeah, that's our favorite thing to do is just spend hours looking at cards no one else is know the names of yet, and then talk about them without mentioning what they do.
And it's really user friendly. But yeah, so you can come and talk to us on Twitter. Find us on any of these places.
Yeah, send us some queries and let us know what you think is gonna get balanced and stuff.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it. We will catch you guys next turn.
See you next turn, folks.